The cabin looked like it had been forgotten by time itself, a relic swallowed by weeds and shadow. Its roof sagged under the weight of years, shingles curling like brittle leaves. Wooden beams had grayed and cracked, and ivy had claimed half the walls as if nature itself were slowly repossessing it. A for sale sign hung crooked in the dirt, the red letters nearly faded to pink. Most people in town called it a ruin. Some said it was haunted. To Daniel Miller, however, it was a miracle. He stood there holding the deed, a paper that had cost him just $1, though the weight of it felt priceless. Emma, his 5-year-old daughter, skipped in circles around him, her laughter ringing like little silver bells. "Daddy, it's a fairy tale house," she exclaimed, eyes wide with wonder as she pointed at the crooked porch. "See? It's hiding secrets. Just like in the stories you tell me at night." Daniel bent down and pulled her into his arms. She smelled faintly of strawberries from the cheap shampoo he'd bought at the corner store. "It's ours now, Em," he whispered, more to convince himself than her. "It may not look like much, but it's a start." For years, he had dreamed of a place to call their own. After Claire's death, life had unraveled like thread from a sweater. The hospital bills had eaten through their savings, the mortgage had slipped from his grasp, and the life he'd promised his little girl had evaporated overnight. He worked nights at the auto shop, days doing odd jobs or anything to keep food on the table. But a home? That had felt like an impossible luxury. Until now. The auction had been strange. Dozens of properties went under the hammer, each with bidders throwing out numbers that made Daniel's stomach churn. But when the auctioneer reached lot number 27 at the cabin on Willow Creek Road, a silence swept the room. No one raised a hand, not even when the price dropped lower and lower. "Last chance," the auctioneer said, his voice echoing in the stale air. "If no one bids, the property will be sold at the lowest legal amount, a broken bar $1. Daniel's hand rose before his mind could catch up. There had been chuckles in the crowd, a few people shaking their heads. A man whispered, he just bought himself a pile of termites. But Daniel didn't care. For $1, he and Emma had something they'd never had before, a place of their own. The first few days were filled with sweeping, scrubbing, and airing out rooms heavy with the scent of dust and rot. The floor groaned beneath their feet, and sometimes Emma would press her ear to the walls and whisper, "It's breathing, Daddy." "The house is breathing," he laughed, though he felt the same thing, as if the cabin had been waiting for them. One evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on a makeshift bed of blankets, Daniel sat alone in the living room. He stared at the crooked floorboards, listening to the chirp of crickets outside and the creak of the old wood beneath him. Something tugged at him, a strange feeling that the cabin was holding something back. The next morning, while pulling up warped boards to check for rot, his crowbar struck metal. He froze. Carefully, he pried loose another plank and revealed a boxer, iron-bound, rusted, heavy with age. His pulse quickened as he lifted it out. Emma clapped her hands. "Treasure chest," she squealed, bouncing on her toes. Daniel managed a weak smile. "Maybe." The latch resisted, but with effort, it popped open. Inside were neatly tied bundles of letters, yellowed with age. Photographs tucked between the papers showed a family, a woman holding a baby in front of this very cabin, a man standing proudly beside a freshly built porch. Beneath the photos were documents, deeds, maps, and notes written in shaky cursive. At the bottom, folded so many times the edges were crumbling, lay a letter. The ink had faded, but the words still spoke clearly. "I, Margaret Thompson, leave this record for whoever finds it. What is buried here is not mine, but it must never be sold. It belongs to the people. And it holds more than money, it holds truth. Guard it well, for greed will come knocking." Daniel read the letter twice, his throat dry. He didn't fully understand what Margaret meant, but something about the words settled deep in his bones. He tucked the box safely away. Within days, the world outside began to notice. First, it was a man in a crisp suit who showed up at the door. His car was sleek, the kind that looked out of place on a dirt road. He introduced himself as Mr. Cartwright, a representative of a development company. "We're interested in acquiring your property," Cartwright said smoothly, his eyes darting past Daniel into the living room. "We're willing to offer you $50,000 cash." "That's more than fair for a broken bar structure." Daniel blinked. 50,000. It was more money than he'd ever seen in his life. For a heartbeat, he imagined what it could do: a proper home for Emma, savings for her future, a little breathing room. But then he thought of Margaret's letter. "I'm not selling," Daniel said firmly. Cartwright's smile tightened. "Think about it. I'll be in touch." By the end of the month, the offers skyrocketed. 100,000, 500, then a cool $2 million. Delivered with a briefcase full of neatly stacked bills. Each time, Daniel shook his head. The neighbors whispered, "He's insane. A single dad turning down millions? What's wrong with him?" But Daniel knew it wasn't about the money. It was about the promise Margaret had written, the weight of something bigger than himself. The pressure grew. Journalists started sniffing around, asking why a mechanic would refuse such sums. Conspiracy theories spread online. Some said he had found gold under the cabin. Others claimed he was hiding a crime. Through it all, Emma's laughter was his anchor. She loved the cabin more each day, filling it with drawings taped to the walls, jars of wildflowers, and stories about how the house was magical. One night, she crawled into his lap and whispered, "Promise we'll never leave, Daddy." "Promise." He kissed her hair. "I promise." But promises are never safe when greed is involved. One evening, Daniel returned from the auto shop to find the door forced open. The box had been dragged out, its contents scattered across the floor. Emma was hiding under the table, clutching her stuffed bunny, tears streaking her face. "They wanted the treasure," she sobbed. "I told them it's ours, Daddy. I told them to go away." Daniel's heart clenched. He held her close, whispering, "You're safe, I've got you." But inside, fury burned. Whoever wanted the cabin wasn't going to stop. That night, he sat by the fire and read through every document in Margaret's box. Slowly, a story unfolded, a one that stretched back generations. The cabin had been a meeting place during the Great Depression, a refuge for families who had lost everything. Beneath its floorboards, they had hidden deeds, records, and letters of proof of corruption by powerful men who had stolen land and wealth from struggling farmers. The cabin wasn't sitting on treasure in gold or jewels. It was sitting on truth, evidence, a history that, if revealed, could change everything for the community. And that was why they wanted him to sell. Daniel understood then why Margaret had written her warning. The cabin didn't belong to him. It belonged to the people whose voices had been buried along with those letters. The next morning, instead of hiding the truth, he took it to the local library. He spoke with historians, archivists, and journalists who still believed in integrity. Piece by piece, the story of the stolen land and the buried truths spread. Developers threatened lawsuits. Anonymous letters warned him to stop. But for every threat, Daniel found an ally. Neighbors who once doubted him now rallied to protect the cabin. Emma's drawings decorated the walls, turning it into a symbol of hope. Strangers drove hours just to see the place where one man refused millions to stand by something greater than himself. And through it all, Daniel remained unshaken, because he had learned something priceless. True wealth isn't measured in money, but in the lives we touch, the truths we honor, and the promises we keep. In the end, the cabin stood not as a nice ore, but as a beacon. A single dad, with nothing but grit and love for his daughter, had turned a $1 home into something worth more than all the money in the world. And every night, as Emma curled up in his arms and whispered, "I love our fairy tale house, Daddy," Daniel knew he had made the right choice. He had kept the promise, and in keeping it, he had found a treasure greater than gold, the power of humanity, the strength of kindness, and a legacy that would outlive them both.